Hey everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, that is Tim, and we are going to talk about horror movies. Specifically, Lake Bodom, which is a new Shudder exclusive. It is a Finnish movie, which is inspired by the Lake Bodom murders, which happened in 1960. So we're going to talk about this. We'll start spoiler free, as we always do. We'll warn you before we go into spoilers. Yeah, so this movie is basically about a group of teenagers who decide they want to try and recreate the conditions in which these murders happened in 1960.
Of course.
Yeah, so basically in 1960, four teenagers went out to this lake, and it's one of these big like cold cases, these mysteries where no one knows who done it. They've never caught the person. Four teenagers went out. Three of them were killed. The last one survived but was brutally injured, and it's like, oh, who attacked them? Was it the survivor? Was it an outsider? And it's still one of these cases that gets brought up a lot in I believe gets brought up a lot in Finnish news whenever there's like a possible lead or a possible solution.
Yeah. Were you familiar with the story before this movie?
No, I never heard of it. It was no Dyatlov Pass incident where. Are you familiar with that one? Yeah.
Yeah, that's was it Russia or whatever, where those just like experienced hikers just mysteriously died and no one knows why.
Well, yeah, they mysteriously died, but it wasn't so much that no one knows what caused it, but like they had a lot of like they could actually look at they had the bodies, and like the injuries they had made like no sense. Like they were,
And they're all like outside of their tents and stuff like that. Like
it was like some of the people had like their internal injuries were like they'd been hit by like a giant car going at like 60 miles per hour, but the outside of their bodies had like no marks to like you'd expect them to be mutilated with that type of impact.
Interesting.
We're not talking about Dyatlov Pass. We're talking about Bodom, which I never heard of. But
I just think it's a little weird. Like that they make the movie sound like, oh, this is based on a true story, but it's not really. It's like the true story is in there, but that's not really what it's about, which I thought was kind of odd.
What makes you say they made it seem like it was based on a true story?
Just when I was like reading like previews and little blurbs about it, like I think I got an email about it or something from Shara that was like, oh, like a new movie based on the true story about like blah blah blah.
That's funny because I never read that specifically, but when I looked it up, it just said no, it's about teenagers trying to recreate this thing that happened in it. So I never got the impression they were selling it to me as anything other than that.
Maybe I misread it or something, but I had that notion going in. So I was like, oh, this is like for a while. I was like, wait a minute, is the true story about these kids recreating this true story? And then you're like, well, no, there's no way.
Yeah. It just uses this true story as like a sort of backdrop, like a setup for what is going on in this movie, and sort of pokes at some of the crazy theories about it and whatever. So that's what the movie's about, and it's very twisty and turny. Actually, there's a lot of things. I don't think it was quite the movie I was expecting it to be when
no, definitely not.
When I started watching it. It definitely went in some different directions, which I kind of appreciate. So, Tim, did you enjoy Lake Bodom?
Did I like Lake Bodom? Let's go with yes, I did. I don't want to say that I overly enjoyed it or loved it or anything. I thought on a technical level it was very well done. Like it was directed very well. It looked really good. There's some really nice cinematography, I thought, in this. I don't really know how I feel about the story though. Like you said, there's definitely some twists and turns. Like there's some things that I kind of saw coming, and then some stuff that I was definitely surprised about. In the end, I think it was a little more complicated than I think it should have been. I think, at least for me, it would have been better served, maybe a little straightforward, but just a few minor quibbles with some of the ending stuff.
I actually quite liked it. I liked it quite a bit. and I actually get what you're saying about but not so much that it was overcomplicated, but about the ending. And I think the only issue I have with the ending is that when I looked up the actual incident after I watched the movie, the ending made a lot more sense to me, because I feel like they should have explained, just made it clear, even if it was just the opening, because obviously there's a bit of opening text at the start of the movie that says, oh, this happened in 1960, but it never really explained a couple of key details that well. And when I looked up the murders afterwards, I was curious. I wanted to see like exactly what the sort of the myth was and all that. I was like, oh, that's why it ended that way. It made more sense. So, but obviously, I'll leave till spoilers before I explain what those details are. But
well, I'll be interested in hearing that. That might tip the scale a little bit more for me than if I know that.
I quite liked it. I thought the characters, while they kind of fit into some sort of archetypes for, like, you know, teenage like horror movie characters. Unlike some American movies, they feel a lot more close to reality though. You know, like, yeah, sure, there's one that's kind of the weird nerdy kid. There's one who's more of the sort of jock-esque character. There's one who's more of the party girl. There's one who's more the quiet girl. But they all feel a bit more, you know, not super two-dimensional. They feel a bit more like real people. So
yeah, I can see that.
So I thought that was good. I thought the cinematography was good. Like you said, I like some of the music that came into it.
Oh yeah, music was good.
Location was interesting. It did this weird thing where it was really twisty and turny, and I appreciate how like it went into these different directions I didn't expect. I will say though that I actually predicted almost every single time it was about to do it. As weird as that sounds, like, I kept guessing what was happening just before it happened. And maybe that's just a sign that it was really well set up to the point, but it felt like, oh no, it just feels like the only thing that could be happening here is this, so it has to be that. And then it was like, oh, it's maybe a little twist.
Yeah, I feel like they give you enough clues that it's not... Like, I wouldn't be surprised if someone told me they were completely surprised, and I also wouldn't be surprised if someone told me they guessed everything that was coming. You know, I think it leaves enough there for you to make educated guesses, especially if you're a big, like, you know, horror fan. You watch a lot of movies. I think there's stuff you're used to, or...
To be fair, I never like guessed stuff super in advance. It was typically like 2 minutes before it happened. I was like, oh, I bet it's this, and then it was. Like that kind of happened like 4 or 5 times throughout the movie.
Yeah.
To its credit though, it never really hurt my enjoyment. Like, it never like felt like it went on a whimper because of that. It just kind of felt like, all right, okay, I saw it coming, but
I think if anything, it makes you excited to find out. I knew this was going to happen, but I want to know why now. Or like, now I'm interested to see what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
I think at one point I was kind of like, I think maybe halfway through the movie or so, I was like, wow, this kind of seemed to like wrap up stuff pretty quickly. I wonder how much is left. And then there's still like, you know, like 40 minutes left or something. I was like, oh, okay, there's probably a lot more places they're going to go with this.
Yeah, it definitely keeps going in new directions, which I actually kind of liked. I liked that, you know, I went into this thinking, oh, it's going to be 4 teenagers go to the woods camping, and they're going to be picked off one by one, and it's not just that.
Right.
Like, it feels like it's going to be that, and it isn't. And that works. It's good. I think the cast are all pretty decent as well. The 4 main actors that we get. Because it is pretty much just 4 actors. Obviously, there's some characters at the start as they're leaving and stuff, but it's mainly just these 4 for the entire thing. But yeah, also even the order of which deaths happen was, I mean, it makes more sense once you get more of the plot.
What's going on.
But I was surprised by like the order of deaths, like who went first, who went second. Like that was surprising to me as well. So no, I quite enjoyed it actually. I think I'm happy to say I'm quite positive on this. I was like, oh, it's a good Shudder exclusive, and I'm happy that I've watched a new movie this year and liked it, because it's felt like it's been a while since I've said that.
And I'm pretty positive on it as well. Again, like probably a little less so than you, but I don't really have too much to complain about it. You know, it looks good. It's you know, it never really dragged or wasn't boring or anything at all.
Pacing is very good. So, no. Yeah, okay, I think we'll get into some spoilers then.
Cool.
So full spoilers from this point on for Lake Bodom. So the movie, so you've got your characters, you've got Ida, you've got Nora, and then you've got Elias and Ati. I'm not sure how to pronounce that name. But you've got these characters who are going out, and the guys trick the girls. They don't tell them they're going to reenact this thing. In fact, it's really just the nerdy guy who wants to do that. The other guy just kind of wants to have girls out camping so he can have sex. I mean, that's all his thing.
Well, I mean, to be fair though, what guy hasn't tried to trick a girl into going to a camp to recreate a murder scene? I mean, it's something I'm sure we've all done as kids.
Yeah, if anything, actually, the sort of the least realistic. I mean, admittedly, given what goes on in the plot later on, it kind of makes sense they don't react any differently. But if it was one thing at the time that felt kind of like weird that the reactions were a bit off, it was when they find out he wants to recreate like the conditions of the murder, and I'm like, okay, even if this is innocent, this is still really weird that you want us to come out here to be in a situation in the hopes that a serial, because that was the thing, is Act keeps saying, oh, what if he's still out there, and like, what if he sees us, and I'm like, but what are you going to do if he does? He's just going to try and kill you.
Yeah.
You haven't thought this through that.
I'm still not exactly sure what he like wanted to recreate too. Well, I guess maybe it's because I don't know the details of the murder, but like, did he just want people to be like, all right, like you are found here, and then was his plan to try to kind of see like how they would have occurred from the killer's standpoint or something?
It seemed like, he made a point of getting people who were similar sizes, 2 guys, 2 girls, similar sizes. He brought some old clothes that I assume he wanted them to wear at some point. Yeah, good luck with that. Yeah, can you wear some of my mother's old clothes from the 70s? So weird. So he's definitely weird, but he's portrayed as weird, so it's okay. It kind of works. You get a sense of the characters. Like Ida is this quiet girl who's very timid, and you sort of get the sense that she did something. Her father's very ashamed of her. You get the sense that recently something happened that's maybe she was, at this point in the movie, I think maybe she was caught with a boy, maybe she had a pregnancy scare or something like that. Like, for some reason, she's been looked down on as basically this, shameful slut of the family. As you get that sense, because the father's like super like angry with her. And you got Nora, who's more of the sort of wilder girl. But so they go out, and there's a lot of talk about the difference between guys and girls, and girls wanting sex, guys wanting sex, girls wanting love, and how they're like, how sexist it is to just assume that one wants one thing and one wants the other, and blah 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 blah. But they go out. The girls find out why they're actually there. They're weirded out a bit, not enough, but they're weirded out a bit. And then the movie gets going proper, and it's when things start really kicking off. And they hint, like, At tries to tell Ida about the pictures, because we find out that there was basically like nude pictures taken of her, and people in school saw them. And he's about to tell her something. And I think at this point in the movie, you're sort of thinking, is he going to tell her that he's responsible, or that he knows who's responsible, or something like that? You kind of get that sense.
Yeah, my first instinct was that, since he's kind of weird, and since he's talking to her, because they mentioned there was something about a stalker, and since he seemed to kind of be the one that was pairing up with her, I was like, is he the stalker? Like, did he like her all along, and this was his plan to get her out there? But then. Yeah, but then once he kind of said something like, about the pictures, I'm like, it'd be weird for him to admit that he did. So then I started thinking, like, maybe the other guy did it, and he has something to say about that.
You're sort of thinking of that, and this is where the movie kind of kicks off, and he gets killed. Like, you see feet come up to the tent, and he gets stabbed as he's sort of like, he's halfway in the tent, because the other two are off missing. And it kind of implies that Elias and Nora are maybe having sex off somewhere, or they're up to something, kind of thing. But like that's when the movie goes down, and then so they panic and they run around and they try and get back to the car, and At's like lying there bleeding out, and he's like, just go, just get out. I can't go anywhere. I'm like lying bleeding, and they go off, and Nora at one point like sort of like trips and twists her ankle, and she's like, "Oh, just leave me. You go get help. Go get the car. Go get help, and I'll stay here." And this is where my first sign was like, "All right, something's not quite right here," because I don't buy for a second that she's with just a slightly twisted ankle, because there's two other people. They can help carry her. They can hand over the shoulder kind of thing.
And at this point, like, you want, safety in numbers. You don't want to be like splitting off, and just leave me in these dark woods alone with no form of protection.
Yeah, it felt super suspicious. And we find out from here that Elias actually has a crush on Ida, and he tells her that, like, I've tried to find these pictures, which is a bit creepy actually. I tried to find these pictures, like, I had to find these photos. But he basically is like, oh, they don't exist. Like, it's a rumor, but no one's actually seen them. Like, people are pretending they've seen them, but no one has. And Edith's like, no, Nora saw them. She told me. And I'm like, all right, okay, that's interesting. Like, because I'm inclined to believe him at this point. I'm inclined to think, all right, okay, maybe something's going on. And then it's while they're talking that he gets stabbed from behind, and I knew immediately that's going to be Nora. Nora's the killer. These two have planned this thing for some reason. Like, these two have planned this because they think these guys are the ones who did the pictures. And sure enough, it's them, and they get out their supplies from the car, and they bag up the bodies, and they're throwing them into the water. And I was like, this is an interesting turn of events. I am generally kind of surprised by all this. I mean, I figured it out just before it happened, but I was kind of like, I was into it. Like, I was enjoying the plot of it. Like,
and like we kind of alluded to earlier, like, I saw this coming as well. But then, what's kind of nice about it is I figured out, oh, Nora's the killer. But then there's still like half the movie left, so I'm kind of like, well, I have no idea what direction they're gonna go with now.
Yeah, well,
like I kept thinking, is there an actual killer, or is it going to be about them trying to hide the bodies and get away with it?
There's that one moment though where they're in, like, it's nighttime already, and it's when everyone's still alive, and like one of them sees a light across the water.
Oh, right.
And I got damn fly in my room. But he like they see a light like in the trees across the water, and I'm like, oh, is that just a red herring, or is that a real killer who's going to pop up later? And obviously they set up this idea that the pictures might actually be fake, like no one's actually seen them. And she's like, oh, Nora's seen them. I was like, oh, wait a minute, I've got a funny feeling that we're going to, like, the path we're going to go down is that Ida's going to question Nora, and Nora's is going to turn out for whatever reason she lied, and that is kind of what happens. Well, we get a cool, well, I say cool, they're a little bit stupid because they leave the car keys with one of the bodies, and Ida has to dive down and find them. But it's a really cool scene actually, because it's like, cold at night in the water, and she's trying to.
I think one of the best things I can say about this movie is it just it looks so pretty at night. Like they did a really good job of making the woods look so dark and quiet and foreboding, and then the scene of her diving in the water, you could almost feel like how cold it was.
Yeah, because she has to dive in the water to get the keys out of the body bag because they've left them with Elias. And yeah, I think it does feel cold. I think that's like a Nordic thing though. I think all the Nordic countries, whenever I watch a movie from like either Finland or Norway or Sweden or anything, I'm always oh, this looks like a nice cold climate. Like I feel like I mean, sure, like obviously it would be cold, and like you don't always want to feel cold, but I feel like the air it always looks really fresh air. Like I always imagine walking around in these countries, and it would just feel really nice and breezy kind of thing. And you'd be used to the snow and all that, probably. Yeah,
sure.
But no, so they get in the car and they're going, and Ida like brings it up, and she starts asking questions. And this is where we get like a really extended sort of flashback as Nora explains kind of everything that happened. And it's funny because this could almost feel like a weird dump of information, but I actually thought it handled quite well. One, I really liked the music that was playing throughout the flashback. They had this sort of synthy music that came in that was kind of like, all right, we're unraveling the mystery. Like, why did this happen? And it's like, basically Nora's in love with Ida, and she was pissed that like Ida was attracted to Elias, so she made up this story and kind of set all this in motion so that she would hate him. And it was Ida that had the thought, oh, I want him to die. Like it was like her that had that idea. Norm was Nora, sorry, is clearly the one that's the psychopath who's like, yeah, I'll do this for you. And it was an interesting little backstory. It was kind of like, all right, okay, so that set up why this is, and it twisted the whole idea of you think the guys tricked the girls, but it was actually them playing the guys. Like they knew they wanted to do this, and they pretended to not know, and like go out and set up the whole thing. So it was basically their plan, and I thought it was fun. I thought it was like a fun little revelation, and I was still expecting something to happen. Now, obviously, it could have just ended up being the girl versus the girl, because Ida's like, nah, we're going to the police. We're like, I don't feel good, because she has this moment before it dies where it's like they're bonding. It's like she's almost looking at him as if he's a human, and then he dies. So you can almost see like there was almost maybe some guilt, but then the idea that maybe they weren't responsible. You know, like it adds this bittersweet to it.
Yeah, you can tell it's kind of eating at her, and obviously she doesn't seem exactly like too thrilled when Nora's like, you know, admitting her love for her and stuff.
Yeah,
like, doesn't seem like it's that reciprocated.
Yeah, and then they end up having a fight, and she like bashes her in the face. Like it's like, oh, you deserved that, and it's like, okay, Nora is a proper psycho. Like she's ready to turn on her at any moment. It's not like it's an obsessive love, clearly, and they end up sort of riding the car into a tree, into a ditch. That's when things get really interesting, because this is when like a random guy in like a tow truck shows up, and do you know what I love about this scene? I love how well it's handled with the tension and the suspense, because he walks up to the window, and he chaps in the window, but the chap on the window is like so cranked up. It's like you feel the bass of every like sort of knock. It is like really, really loud, and it feels proper like eerie. And I think what's really effective about this is that these two girls, especially Nora, have just killed two people. They're bad guys, but you still feel kind of like tense and like, you know, creeped out by the fact that there could be an actual proper sinister killer about to deal with them. And it's all, you know, it's almost like an episode of Tales from the Crypt where they get their comeuppance because they have done something wrong. So the guy tows them, and he's dragging them along.
And it looks like really cool too. Like you never see like all of the guy. Like you never see his face.
Oh yeah, he's always in silhouette. He's always like in darkness or silhouette, where like the headlights of the tow truck are like, you know, making him a silhouette, and he's just this dark figure essentially. You never see him, and that's where I think it's implying that he is the killer. He is the one from 1960, where and the reason why we can't see him is because no one really knows who it is. So the idea is just this mysterious outsider who no one knows. Although the timeline doesn't quite add up when you really think about it. He doesn't look old enough to be like. I guess, even if he was only 18 when he did the killings, right, in 1960, he would be like another 50s. You know, he'd be in his 70s, right?
Yeah, about that. 70s, 80s.
Yeah, because I'll say he was 20 in 1960 to make the math easier. That's another 47. Yeah, he'd be 67 if he was 20. Okay, well, that's not as unbelievable, but it's still, he doesn't look that old. He looks like a guy who's like maybe 40. Yeah, so they're getting towed. They're getting towed by this truck, and he starts moving really fast, and they get the sense, oh shit, we're in danger. And the car's like sort of, you know, sliding about, and like they're trying to like get out of the car, and like Ida's like, maybe I should jump, and maybe I shouldn't. And the movie's actually pretty straightforward from this point, because the car eventually crashes, and it's like a probably good crash as well. The car like flips around, like everything.
The whole scene was really cool, and I like the way the guy was maneuvering the car, and like at one point they did try to jump out, then he like slams the car into a tree, so it like bangs the door in. It's pretty exciting. Yeah,
and then the car's upside down after it's flipped, and he's still just dragging it along until he gets to wherever he's going. And then from there, he kind of like, he takes them back out into the woods. You can see like another day's passed. He's got them bound and tied up. In fact, actually, he's used like glue on their mouth so they can't speak, and it's proper sinister looking. Especially later on, because he drags them both out of the tent with the bodies of the two guys, which he has obviously retrieved. And you get the sense that he's recreating the crime scene from the 1960 murders. And we get this really sort of like abstract, like quick flashes of things happening as he's presumably killing Nora. And we see that one of the girls is like screaming and their mouth actually rips open. like in these quick flashes, and it's proper sinister. And then the movie ends, and basically Ida gets dropped off back at her house, still bound, and it's kind of like, people think she might have done the killings, and that's kind of the end of the movie. Like, it's just kind of implied that, oh, maybe it was her because she's like alive, kind of thing. And that's how the movie ends. And it did seem very abrupt to me, the ending, when I watched it. But when I actually looked up what happened with the killings as well, is there was one survivor, and people did think for a long time that maybe it was him, to the point where he was actually arrested, and then the jury found him not guilty. But that didn't happen at the time. That happened in like 2004.
Oh.
So like, decades went by, and then they decided, oh, we think it might have been him actually, and then so like the idea that the killer recreates it to the point where there's a survivor, so it might have been them, and like people might not believe her because it sounds like a crazy story, and so on. So I don't know. Like, the idea, if it is the same killer, does he just have this weird, oddly like specific thing he likes to do, where he kills 4 people or 3 people, leaves a 4th one alive, and like, I don't know. It's interesting.
Were there any other details, like the stuff with the glue? Is that something that really happened, or?
No, I never seen anything about the glue. I seen like a long list of like potential suspects where they thought it might have been them. At least 3 different people confessed to it, because big famous murder, like nut jobs like to take credit, I guess. So it could have been one of them, but no one knows for sure. No one has an idea. One of the details though is, and I guess only one of the murders in this actually kind of lives up to this, but again, it's just kind of recreated at the end when he puts them in the tent. But most of the bodies were killed through the tent. Like, he never took them outside. It was more like stabbing and blunt objects like through the tent kind of thing.
Oh, okay, interesting.
But interesting. These murders, yeah.
Well, I didn't say I was a fan of them.
You're a big fan. Yeah. I just imagine you've got a scrapbook. You're like Oscar from Letter A1, and you've got a scrapbook of murders. I can see it in your eyes, Tim.
I do think true crime is interesting, but I would never glorify a real life murder.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting about this movie, is like it takes like a real thing and like sort of plays up the myths and the stories about it. But it never they don't recreate their They didn't just make a movie that's like, oh, this is the night of these teenagers, and like we see these people who actually die. It did this it took the myth of it, but it did something in present day with fictional characters. And I mean, if that still bothers you, I mean, I can kind of get it, but I think it's far enough removed that it's not feeling super disrespectful to them.
Yeah, I feel like it's so long ago, and like it's probably like a little easier for us that this took place in a country far away that we never, aren't really familiar with the incident. I don't know if it's, if it is so much more famous there, if it's maybe if there's a little bit of a weirder feeling, but I could see, like you're saying, like people might find that kind of weird. I was trying to think if there was like an American equivalent to this, which, I mean, there definitely have been like a lot of serial killer movies. Yeah. Well, no, I'm talking about movies, but like, I couldn't think of any off the top of my head. Like they're.
I guess the closest thing is the way that, like, there's like a good 3 or 4 movies that have been inspired by Ed Gein a little bit.
Yeah.
But not to the same extent where it's like the exact thing. But I don't know. It's interesting. One of the points was though is that it still comes up in the news sometimes if they think they've found like a lead. Like, even today, which makes me think there was like a weird fetishization of it where people are really fascinated by it, which makes sense that eventually there was a movie kind of related to it, like, getting made. It kind of makes sense that they eventually did that. And yeah, I think you do need the time. I think 5 years after, it would have been like, oh, this is just poor taste, like, whereas I don't know. I mean, some of these kids' parents probably are still alive, but I don't know how they feel about it. I imagine not particularly great. So I guess that takes us to ratings. Ratings for Lake Bodom. Tim, what would you rate it?
I think I'm gonna give it 7.5. I think maybe if I liked the ending a little better, maybe I could bump that up to an 8. I feel like definitely hearing you talk about like the original incident and stuff helps it. So maybe I have to go back rewatch the ending now with that in mind, and maybe that might bump it up a little bit for me.
I wonder if they'd made that more clear at the start with the text and said this is how it was found, like how it, like the aftermath of it. This is what kind of was left, and maybe have got the ending more originally. But
I think it, I think 7.5 for me. But again, it might be bumped up to an 8 the more I think about it or so. But it was definitely good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that score. I think it's solid. I think it's pretty like the cast. I think it's nice and twisty and turny, and I enjoyed it. I don't think it's super deep. I think it's a very, it's twisty and turny, but it's not like, it's all very surface level. It's like, oh, here's a fun little twist. Here's a fun little twist. It didn't really make me think about the themes or anything like that more so. Like, I thought it was going to. I thought at the start of the movie when it was hinting at all this talk of the differences between men and women, I thought it was going to go into that in more depth. And I guess obviously it turns out that Nora's in love with Ida and like she's obsessed with her to the point where she's willing to do this. That is the connection. That's where it ties in, where she wants to do this, but it never made me go, oh wow, like this feels really like there's a lot of things going on like behind the surface. No, it was good. It was solid. It was fun. I was never bored, and it kept me entertained throughout. So
yeah, I also wonder if I had maybe weird expectations going into it, because I thought this was going to be like a straight up slasher flick. Like I was expecting someone in a mask and hunting down teenagers and stuff, which I'm fine that that's not what we got. But again, I don't know if having different expectations hurt or maybe even helped it. Maybe I liked that, oh, this isn't what I was expecting.
Yeah, it wasn't quite what I was expecting, but I did like where it went. So I would recommend checking it out. I think it's a solid little movie. It's the sort of thing where I don't think it's going to be like, when we look back on this year, I don't think it's got a chance of being at the top of the list. But I think it's a solid gem that you can find for the year. I thought it was well told. So
definitely
check out Lake Bodom if you want to. So that is this episode's movie. So let us know what you thought of the movie in the comments below if you've seen it. Like and subscribe and all that stuff. Helps us out a lot. You can help us out a little bit more by going over to patreon.com/MildFuzzTV and check out some of the bonuses that are over there if you want to support the channel. Get us on Twitter at @mail_fuzz for channel updates. Individual Twitters, I'm at Wibble89, Tim's at Tim Vergulish, but that is us. So thank you very much for watching once again, guys. Keep watching scary movies. We'll see you next time.